My wife died and left me only one item in her will, a password-locked cell phone. My children laughed at me as they took over the $12 million company, the house, and all the equipment. Humiliated and alone, I tried everything to unlock it for months. 3 days before my 68th birthday, at the stroke of midnight, the phone finally unlocked itself and began to ring. A familiar voice cut through the silence of my small, cramped apartment. "Happy birthday, my love. You're almost 68. Now the real game begins. What Vivian said next made me drop the phone. My hands were trembling so much that the device fell onto the worn carpet, but her voice kept coming from the speaker, revealing secrets that would change everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the true legacy she had built in the shadows. My name is Hunter Pierce, and I'm about to turn 68 years old. I spent 40 years building Pierce Construction from nothing into a $12 million company with these two hands. Started with a beat-up pickup truck, a toolbox full of my daddy's tools, and a dream bigger than the hunger I felt growing up dirt poor in East Dallas. But to understand how I got to that moment, staring at a phone that held my entire future, I have to go back 3 months. 3 months to the exact day of Vivian's funeral when my world came crashing down like a house built on rotten foundation. Vivian died on a Tuesday afternoon in March, a massive stroke in our home office, surrounded by financial documents and unsigned contracts. She was 65 years old, but she managed our books like she was half that age. Our housekeeper found her slumped over the oak desk I had built by hand for our 25th anniversary. She called 911, but it was too late. Her heart had stopped beating 10 minutes before anyone opened that door. 10 minutes where my wife died alone, without my calloused hand holding hers, without my voice telling her everything would be okay. That guilt gnawed at me worse than a rusty nail in green wood. The mahogany casket was still open at Sparkman Hillcrest when Preston, my oldest boy, already had his phone glued to his ear, setting up meetings with lawyers. He didn't even wait for them to close the lid on his mother. Madison was scrolling through documents on her fancy tablet, sitting in the front row wearing that black dress that cost more than I used to make in a month back in the day. Her dry eyes never once looked toward her mama's body. Wesley, my youngest, at least had the decency to look sad, but I knew him too well after 40 years. That boy never had a backbone of his own. Always followed whatever his older siblings decided, like a nail following a magnet. I was sitting alone in the second row. Alone. After 42 years of marriage, not one soul sat next to me. The funeral parlor was packed with white roses and lilies, filling the room with that cloying smell that made my stomach turn. Vivian hated cut flowers, said they were throwing good money after something that'd be dead in 3 days. But there they were, hundreds of them, sent by business partners who never really knew her, who never saw her balance books at dawn or stay up all night when the kids had fevers. Mr. Cooper, our family lawyer, showed up just as the preacher started talking. He was a tall, skinny man with silver hair slicked back and a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than my first truck. He leaned over to whisper something to Preston. I watched my son's eyes light up like Christmas morning, that same greedy look he'd get as a kid when he found loose change in my work clothes. Except this wasn't about pocket change. This was about everything I'd built with sweat and determination. The service lasted exactly 30 minutes. Pastor Williams talked about a Vivian I barely recognized, some saint who spent her days helping the poor and spreading joy, empty words that floated around like sawdust in the air conditioning. Nobody mentioned that Vivian kept every penny of our earnings accounted for down to the last cent. Nobody said she helped me grow Pierce Construction from a one-man operation where I was swinging a hammer for $8 an hour into a company that employed 47 good men. That she came to Dallas with $300 in her pocket and faith in her husband's rough hands. Nobody spoke about the woman who had a stroke going over financial statements because the pressure finally got to her brilliant mind. They didn't talk about the real woman who built an empire alongside a carpenter's son. When the preacher finished his piece, Preston was first to head for the door. Didn't even walk up to say goodbye to his mama one last time. The will reading was set for 2 days later. That's when my real education began. Learning just how much my own flesh and blood thought of the man who'd given them everything. Mr. Cooper called us to his 15th floor office in one of those glass towers downtown Dallas, the kind of building I'd helped wire and frame back in my younger days when I was still swinging a hammer instead of managing crews. The conference room had walls painted that fancy cream color rich folks love, decorated with framed diplomas and photos of Cooper shaking hands with politicians and oil men. The table was polished so bright I could see my weathered face reflected back at me. I looked old, tired, like a man who'd been rode hard and put up wet. Preston planted himself at the head of that table like he already owned the place. Madison sat on his right, tapping away at her phone like the rest of us weren't even there. Wesley took his spot on Preston's left, nervous as a cat in a doghouse, drumming his fingers on the wood. They stuck me at the far end, as far from the lawyer as possible, like I was some embarrassing relative they didn't want to claim. Cooper opened up his leather briefcase with all the ceremony of a preacher opening his Bible. The sound of papers rustling filled that tense silence. He cleared his throat, adjusted his reading glasses, and started reading in that flat, emotionless voice lawyers use to strip the humanity out of life's most painful moments. I, Vivian Pierce, being of sound mind and body, declare this document as my last will and testament. Each word hit me like a ball-peen hammer to the chest. To my son, Preston Pierce, I bequeath 45% of the shares of Pierce Construction, including all current projects in Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. Preston's smile spread across his face like oil on water, made my stomach turn to see it. To my daughter, Madison Pierce, I bequeath 25% of the shares along with the main house in Highland Park and all its contents. Madison just nodded like she was confirming a grocery order, cold as a January morning. To my son, Wesley Pierce, I bequeath the remaining 20% of the shares plus the equipment yard and the vacation cabin at Lake Texoma. Wesley let out a breath like he'd been holding it for a month. The three of them had just carved up 90% of everything I'd spent 40 years building. My company, my life's work, divided up like they were splitting a pizza. I sat there waiting, my hands sweating like I was back to framing houses in August heat. The silence stretched out longer than a country mile. Cooper turned the page, avoiding my eyes like I had something contagious. To my husband, Hunter Pierce. The room went dead quiet. I could hear my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break free. I bequeath my personal cell phone, currently stored in the safe in my private office, with specific instructions that it not be tampered with or forced open under any circumstances. Dead silence. Then the laughter started. Preston was first, letting out this dry, cruel laugh that bounced off those glass walls like a ricochet. Madison covered her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking like a paint mixer. Even Wesley, my baby boy who I used to take fishing every weekend, let out an uncomfortable chuckle that cut me deeper than any saw blade. A phone. Preston wiped fake tears from his eyes. Mama had a sense of humor right to the end. She worked herself into a stroke, and the only thing she leaves Dad is some old flip phone. This has got to be a mistake, Madison said, staring at Cooper like he'd lost his mind. Dad gets a phone while we get the entire company? Cooper kept that poker-faced lawyers spend years perfecting. The will is crystal clear and was drawn up by Mrs. Pierce 3 weeks before her passing. 3 independent witnesses verified everything. There's no mistake here. It's pathetic, Preston said, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed like some king on his throne. 42 years of marriage, and she leaves you a phone that probably doesn't even turn on anymore. Something inside me cracked in that moment. Not loud and dramatic like a tree falling. Quiet. Like when you see that first hairline crack in a concrete foundation and you know the whole structure's compromised. That's everything? My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from somebody else's mouth. Cooper nodded. There is one additional provision. Mr. Pierce has 30 days to vacate the family residence. 30 days. 42 years of marriage boiled down to 30 days. Madison was already doing math in her head. We can speed that up. Dad doesn't need all that space anyway. I found a nice little efficiency apartment. 1 bedroom, 1 bath. Perfect for someone his age. Perfect for someone his age. Like I was some old dog they were dropping off at the pound. Reasonable, I said, and surprised myself by laughing. A bitter sound that tasted like sawdust. Reasonable like me giving up my carpentry apprenticeship to run this business full time. Reasonable like all those 14-hour days I worked while y'all were in college. Reasonable like every sacrifice I made so you could have everything handed to you on a silver platter. Don't be dramatic, Dad, Preston said, already packing papers into his briefcase. Mama made her choice. She obviously had her reasons. Maybe you should ask yourself what you did to deserve nothing but an old phone. Those words went through me like a nail gun on full power. Cooper handed me a small brass key. The phone's in the safe behind the painting in Mrs. Pierce's office. I took that key. Didn't weigh more than a penny nail, but it felt like I was holding the weight of my entire ruined life. My kids walked out of that lawyer's office arguing about profit margins and expansion plans, not one of them looking back at the old man they'd just buried alive. I stayed glued to that chair, staring at the little brass key in my palm, wondering how a man's whole life could come down to something smaller than a finish nail. I drove over to get that phone the same afternoon. Vivian's office was exactly like she'd left it the day she died. Financial statements still spread across that oak desk like blueprints on a job site. Half a cup of coffee sitting next to her computer mouse, gone cold as a January wind. The whole room still smelled like her vanilla perfume mixed with the scent of old papers and ambition. The safe was built right into the wall behind this abstract painting she'd bought years back. Some modern art piece in blues and grays that I never understood but she swore was a good investment. I moved that heavy frame to one side. The hinges on the safe were well-oiled German engineering. When I turned that brass key, it opened with a soft click that seemed way too quiet for what I was about to find. Inside was just one thing, an old cell phone, the kind with actual buttons that you had to press, not like these new touchscreen gadgets. It was turned off, sitting there like a sleeping rattler. I picked it up careful-like, treating it like a piece of delicate trim work. The plastic felt cold against my work-roughened fingers. I found the power button and gave it a push. The screen flickered to life with that old startup sound. The logo flashed up, then the background picture appeared. Our wedding day. There I was at 26, wearing a rented tux that was too tight in the shoulders, grinning like I'd just won the lottery. Vivian next to me, 25 years old and beautiful as a spring morning, both of us so full of hope, we didn't know what to do with it all. Then came the lock screen. Enter password. 6 empty circles waiting for numbers I didn't have the first clue about. I tried the obvious stuff first. Our anniversary, 03/16/80. The screen shook its head at me like a disappointed foreman. I tried Vivian's birthday, 12/05/58. Same rejection. Preston's birthday, Madison's, Wesley's. Error after error after error, like missing the same cut over and over. After 10 wrong tries, red letters popped up. Too many incorrect attempts. Try again in 30 minutes. I dropped into Vivian's leather chair, that big executive throne where she'd spent countless hours running numbers and making decisions that moved serious money. The thing still held her scent, that vanilla perfume mixed with the smell of ledger books and determination. I held that phone against my chest, and for the first time since we'd put her in the ground, I completely fell apart. I hadn't cried at the funeral, hadn't shed a tear during that will reading. But sitting there alone in her office, surrounded by everything she'd built, holding this damn puzzle of a phone, I broke down like an old roof in a hailstorm. The tears came hot and salty, soaking through my work shirt. I cried for those 42 years we'd had together, cried for the skilled carpenter I used to be before I became a businessman, cried for every family dinner where my own children looked through me like I was invisible, cried because my wife died alone in this very room while her brilliant mind was working itself to death, and I wasn't there to catch her when she fell. But more than anything, I cried because part of me was madder than hell at her, mad because she'd left me this cruel riddle instead of something normal. Why not just leave me some money, a piece of property, or at least a letter explaining why she apparently thought I was worth nothing but an old phone? Even dead, Vivian was still playing her control games. I spent the next 30 minutes tearing that office apart looking for clues. Checked every desk drawer like I was searching for a lost screw in my toolbox. Found bank statements, construction contracts, old photos of buildings we'd put up over the years. In the bottom drawer was a box of Cuban cigars I'd been saving and a bottle of 25-year-old bourbon meant for celebrating, but nothing that looked like a password hint, nothing that explained why this phone was all she thought I deserved. When the half hour was up, I tried again, the day we first met. Wrong. The address of our first little house. Wrong. My social security number. Wrong again. Too many incorrect attempts. Try again in 60 minutes. The waiting time was doubling every round, like compound interest working against me. This was some kind of security system designed to stop hackers or maybe just to torture desperate old men who'd lost everything. I locked up the office and headed home as the sun was setting over Dallas. Those 30 days to get out of my own house were ticking away faster than water through a broken pipe. Preston had already brought in some appraiser to put prices on everything I owned. Madison was hiring movers to catalog what she wanted to keep. Wesley just avoided looking at me altogether, the coward. That night, lying in the king-sized bed I'd shared with Vivian for 42 years, I tried that phone again. Tried every combination of numbers that meant something to our life together. The year I started the company, wrong. Our first job address, wrong. The year Preston was born, wrong. Too many incorrect attempts. Try again in 120 minutes. 2 hours. That phone was punishing me for not knowing my own wife. The days crawled by like molasses in winter. Every morning I'd watch my children tear apart the life Vivian and I had built with our bare hands. Preston sold 3 of my vintage work trucks in the first week, including my '85 Ford that I'd restored myself piece by piece. Madison hired some fancy moving company to catalog and box up everything worth a damn. Wesley moved himself out to the lake house and started posting pictures on Facebook of himself fishing from my dock, drinking beer like he was on permanent vacation. At night, I kept wrestling with that phone. Tried every combination I could think of, zip codes from places we'd lived, lucky numbers Vivian used to play, dates of jobs that meant something to us. Nothing worked. The wait times kept growing like a bad debt. 4 hours, 8 hours, 16 hours. That thing was becoming more locked down than Fort Knox. 3 weeks into this nightmare, Preston walked into my bedroom without even knocking. Found me sitting on the bed with that phone in my hands, probably looking like some crazy old coot. "Dad, you're still fooling with that thing?" His voice had all the warmth of a February morning. "It's pathetic. It's just an old phone. Mama probably forgot it was even in there." "Your mother never forgot anything," I said, my voice rough as 40 grit sandpaper from staying quiet too long. "Whatever." Preston shrugged like he was swatting a fly. "We need to talk about your situation. Your 30 days are up next week. Madison found you a place. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, tiny kitchen. It's small, but it's all you need. All I need. Like I was some old dog they were putting in a kennel. You won't be having visitors anyway," he continued, twisting the knife a little deeper. "Your buddies from the job sites stopped calling years ago. You were always too busy being the perfect husband to maintain friendships." The cruelty in his voice hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. "The place runs $900 a month. We'll cover the first 6 months. After that, you'll have to figure something out. Figure something out. I'm pushing 68 years old. Haven't swung a hammer for real work in 20 years. How was I supposed to figure anything out?" "Not my problem, Dad. Mama made her choices. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, she would have left you something more than an old phone." Preston walked out, leaving those words stuck in my chest like splinters from rough lumber. That night, I tried the phone again with shaking hands. There weren't many logical combinations left to try. I punched in my birthday, but the screen just shook its head at me one more time. Too many attempts. Device will be locked for 30 days. 30 days. Same amount of time I had left in my own house. The screen went black as a moonless night, dead to any button I pressed. Vivian had left me an impossible puzzle, and now I couldn't even keep trying to solve it. Moving day was the most humiliating experience of my 67 years on this earth. 2 guys in gray uniforms packed up what was left of my life into cardboard boxes. Clothes that hung loose on my shrinking frame, a few tools Madison said I could keep, and photos nobody else wanted. Everything fit in the back of a beat-up moving van. 42 years reduced to 8 boxes that could have held Christmas decorations. Madison supervised the whole thing personally, checking every box like I was some thief trying to steal from my own family. "It's just protocol, Dad. Don't take it personal. Don't take it personal." Like being treated like a criminal in your own home was just business. The efficiency apartment was exactly what Preston had described, and worse. Beige walls with more stains than a shop rag, a window that looked out on a parking lot full of beat-up cars, and a bathroom so cramped you had to back out to turn around. The kitchenette was 2 electric burners and a refrigerator that sounded like a diesel engine with a bad bearing every 20 minutes. The movers dumped my boxes in the middle of that one room and left without a word. I sat down on the thin mattress that came with the place. probably been slept on by 100 other broken-down men, and looked around at what my life had become. That phone was in my toolbox, still locked, still mocking me from the darkness. Outside, Dallas kept on living its normal life. Cars honking, people laughing, the world spinning like nothing had changed. But my world had stopped dead in its tracks. I pulled out that phone and stared at my reflection in its black screen. Looked like an old scarecrow somebody had forgotten in a field. "What did you want me to find, Vivian?" I asked that dead device. "Why did you do this to me?" Silence was all the answer I got. But something was building inside me, some kind of determination I hadn't felt since I was young and hungry. I didn't know it yet, but that phone was about to change everything. I just had to survive long enough to figure out how. The days ahead would test every bit of stubborn Texas pride I had left in me, but I'd been building things from nothing my whole life. Maybe it was time to build myself back up from scratch. The days in that efficiency apartment fell into a routine that would have broken a younger man. Every morning I'd wake up on that thin mattress that creaked like old floorboards, staring at water stains on the ceiling that looked like maps of places I'd never see. The man I used to be, the skilled craftsman who could frame a house in his sleep, who had dreams bigger than the Texas sky, had disappeared so long ago I couldn't even remember what he looked like. That phone sat on my makeshift nightstand like a sleeping enemy. It had been locked down tight for 2 weeks, and I was counting every hour until those 30 days were up and I could try again. The money Preston had promised showed up exactly once. $600 dropped into my account with a note scrawled like he was doing me some huge favor. "Reduce the amount. You're spending too much." $600 to cover rent, food, utilities, and my blood pressure medicine that ran $120 a month. I started skipping pills, taking one every other day to make them stretch. Hunger became my constant companion, that gnawing ache in your gut that you eventually learn to ignore like background noise on a job site. I was down to eating once a day, cheap white bread from the discount grocery, maybe a piece of bologna when it was marked down for quick sale. My clothes started hanging on me like tarps on scaffolding. When I looked in that cracked bathroom mirror, I saw a stranger staring back. Some ghost of a man who used to be me. My own children didn't call, not once. I tried reaching Preston from the payphone on the corner since I couldn't afford a cell plan anymore. His secretary answered with that cold, professional voice they teach in business school. "Mr. Pierce is in an important meeting. I'm his father. It's urgent. He'll return your call when he has time." Of course, he never did. I tried Madison next. Her phone rang 6 times before clicking to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Madison Pierce. Please leave a message. Not even a 'have a great day' or nothing." I left messages, 3, 4, 5 of them. Might as well have been talking to a brick wall. Wesley was the only one who responded, and that was just a text. "Dad, I need space. This is hard for me too. Please understand." Space. Boy had a whole lake house to himself while I was rationing bologna sandwiches. The nights were the worst part. That building was full of sounds that'd keep a dead man awake. Couples fighting upstairs, music thumping from down the hall, sirens wailing on the street like the whole city was falling apart. And there I was, lying in the dark with that dead phone pressed against my chest like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I talked to it sometimes, to Vivian, to the phone, to both. Why did you hate me so much? What did I do to deserve this? I gave up my carpentry, my dreams, my drinking buddies. I became the businessman you needed, the father our kids needed. I made myself invisible so all of y'all could shine. And this is what I get for it? That phone never answered back, but I kept talking anyway. I turned 67 in that apartment. Not a soul remembered. No calls, no texts, no card in the mail. I spent the day sitting by that grimy window, looking out at the parking lot, eating dry bread and counting the hours until I could try that phone again. When those 30 days finally crawled by, my hands shook so bad I could barely hold the device steady. I pressed the power button like I was defusing a bomb. The screen flickered to life. Logo appeared, then that wedding picture of us looking young and stupid and happy. Finally, the lock screen showed up. Enter password. 6 empty circles waiting for me to get it right this time. I'd spent those 30 days thinking harder than I ever had in my life. Made a list in an old spiral notebook of every possible combination I hadn't tried yet. I was more careful this time, more strategic, like planning out a complicated roof line. You only get one shot to cut those rafters right. I started with the date Vivian came to Dallas from her little East Texas town. Wrong answer. The apartment number of our first place together. Wrong again. The day I got my contractor's license. Still wrong. Every rejection was like hitting my thumb with a framing hammer. After burning through my careful list, that familiar message popped up. Too many incorrect attempts. Try again in 30 minutes. 30 minutes that felt longer than a double shift in August heat. When I could try again, something made me change tactics. I quit thinking about happy memories and started thinking about the hard times. Vivian wasn't sentimental, she was practical, tough as a $2 steak. She was shaped by struggle, not celebration. I tried the date her daddy died. She was 16, never talked much about it, but I knew it marked her deep. Wrong. The date we almost lost the business during that recession in the 90s. We came within a whisker of bankruptcy, Vivian staying up nights crunching numbers. Wrong again. Too many incorrect attempts. Try again in 60 minutes. This was turning into a nightmare that wouldn't end. 2 more months crawled by like a wounded animal. The money from Preston stopped coming altogether. I called that fancy office of his again and again, but now even his secretary wouldn't take my calls. Just got routed to some automated system that sent me in circles like a dog chasing its own tail. I left desperate messages that went nowhere. Started selling everything I had left that was worth a plugged nickel. First went the clothes that didn't fit my shrinking frame anymore, then my good tools, the ones I'd collected over 40 years of working with my hands. Had to take them to a pawn shop run by some kid who didn't know a Phillips head from a flat blade. He gave me maybe 20 cents on the dollar, but those few bills kept me breathing for another week. The landlord showed up at my door on a Tuesday morning, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Heavy-set guy with beer breath and dead eyes. "Mr. Pierce, you're 2 months behind on rent." No. My kids said they'd cover it, but don't care about your family problems. I need 1-800 or you're out. Please, just give me another week. I'm expecting 2 weeks, he cut me off. That's it. 2 weeks or I'm filing papers to have you evicted. He left me standing there holding that ultimatum like a pink slip. 2 weeks to come up with $1,800 I didn't have and no earthly idea how to get it. That night, sitting on that mattress with my stomach eating itself from the inside out, I held that phone in my hands. Wasn't even trying to unlock it anymore. Just stared at my reflection in that black screen, looking for answers that weren't there. Vivian, if there's any part of you left in this world, I need a sign. Anything. Because I can't do this anymore. I'm breaking apart like old lumber in the rain. The phone stayed silent as a grave, but then something changed. Hard to explain, like electricity in the air before a storm hits. I looked at that screen and something was different, though I couldn't put my finger on what. I powered it up again, going through the same routine I'd done 100 times. Logo, wedding picture, lock screen. This time I didn't think or plan, just let my fingers move on pure instinct, like muscle memory from all those years doing finish work. Our anniversary, March 16th, and Vivian's age when we got married, 25. The screen flickered. My heart stopped dead in my chest. Those circles filled up green as spring grass. The phone unlocked. The screen lit up so bright in that dark apartment it was like staring into a welder's arc. My hands trembled so bad I almost dropped the thing. After months of trying, months of getting kicked in the teeth by that security system, I'd finally cracked the code Vivian left for me. The home screen was nothing like a normal phone. No games, no social media apps, none of that modern nonsense. Just 3 icons sitting in the middle of that black background. A folder labeled for Hunter, a calendar with one date circled in red, and a voice recorder app. My finger hovered over that screen like I was about to touch a hot stove, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. What had Vivian hidden in this thing? Why put me through hell for months before letting me see it? I touched that folder first. It opened up to show 10 numbered files. Each one was big enough to be documents or pictures. I opened the first file with hands that wouldn't stay steady. Property deed. I read the first line and my breath caught in my throat like I'd been sucker punched. Property registered in the name of Hunter Pierce, an address in Plano, a 2-story office building in a decent part of town. Estimated value, $12,200,000. In my name, had been in my name for the last 8 years, according to the paperwork. Vivian's signature was right there, along with notary stamps and dates. This wasn't some joke or mistake. This was real as the calluses on my hands. I opened the second file with fingers that felt like sausages. Another deed, this time for an equipment yard in Garland. 12 acres with storage buildings. Value $900,000. In my name. Third file, industrial warehouse in Arlington. $600,000. Fourth, fifth, sixth. I kept opening them like a man possessed. Properties scattered around the Dallas area, all registered to Hunter Pierce, all with legal documentation that would stand up in any court. When I finished looking through all 10 files, I had to set that phone down before I dropped it. The numbers swam around in my head like they were alive. I added them up 3 times to make sure I wasn't seeing things. $8,000. $8 million in real estate I never knew I owned. All those months living like a vagrant while I was sitting on a fortune that would make my children's inheritance look like pocket change. Vivian had built me a secret empire right under their noses. The world started spinning around me like I was drunk. Those grimy apartment walls felt like they were closing in. How was this possible? Why hadn't Vivian told me? And what else was hiding in that phone? I backed out of that folder and touched the calendar icon. It opened to show just one date, marked in red, March 18th. My 68th birthday, still 3 days away. There was a note attached. Everything will be revealed on this date. Wait, my love. Wait, wait. Even from the grave, Vivian was asking me to be patient, but she'd already given me $8 million in properties I didn't know existed. What else could there be? I touched the voice recorder icon with a finger that felt numb as a block of wood. 1 recording saved. Duration, 43 minutes. Recorded 2 weeks before Vivian died. 2 weeks before her brilliant mind finally couldn't take the pressure anymore. My thumb hovered over that play button like it was the trigger on a loaded gun. Part of me wanted to hear her voice again, to understand what the hell was happening. But another part was scared down to my bones about what that recording might tell me. The tears started before I could stop them. Not the kind of tears that come from sadness. These were tears of confusion, anger, relief, and about 1,000 other feelings hitting me like a freight train. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, took a breath deep enough to fill my work boots, and pressed play. Static. Then a throat clearing. Then her voice, clear as if she was sitting right next to me in that ratty apartment. Hello, Hunter. If you're listening to this, it means I kept this plan secret right to the end. It means I died without telling you anything. And it means you've been through the hell I designed specifically for you. Her tone was calm, businesslike, the same voice she used when explaining contract details or budget numbers. Made my skin crawl to hear it. I know you're madder than a wet hornet at me right now. You got every right to be. I left you a locked phone while our children got everything visible. Made you look like a fool, the forgotten one, the man who wasn't worth a damn thing. And worse than that, I let them humiliate you. Let them kick you out of your own house, let you go hungry and cold in some terrible place. She paused. I could hear her breathing heavy, like she was carrying something too heavy for her shoulders. I'm sorry, my love. Sorry for every second of pain I put you through. But I needed it to happen exactly like this. Needed our children to show their true colors when they thought they'd won everything. Needed the world to see them without their masks on. And more than anything, I needed you to see yourself without me propping you up. My hand went to my mouth. The tears were falling silent as rain now. For 42 years you were my husband, my partner, the father of my babies. But somewhere along the way, you forgot who you were before all that. You forgot the skilled craftsman, the man who could build anything with his bare hands. You became my shadow, and I let it happen because it was easier for me, more convenient. Her voice cracked just a little. This phone isn't just an inheritance, Hunter. It's your freedom. Those documents you found are real as sunrise. The money is yours, always was. I built that empire in your name because I knew someday you'd need to stand on your own 2 feet. I knew our children would turn into greedy monsters. I watched them grow up that way and refused to see it clear. That was my biggest failure as a mother. The recording kept going. Every word was a hammer blow to my chest. 3 days from now, you'll turn 68. On that day, this phone will unlock the rest of what I planned. But right now, I want you to know something important. You're not alone. You never were. And what comes next will change everything. Static. End of recording. I sat there in the dark holding that phone like it was made of gold, trying to process what I'd just heard. Didn't sleep a wink that night. Just sat on that thin mattress, replaying Vivian's voice over and over until I had every word, every pause, every breath burned into my memory. Her voice filled up that empty apartment, made it feel less like a tomb, but it also filled my head with questions that still didn't have answers. What else had she planned? What would happen on my birthday? She'd already given me a fortune. What more could there be? When morning came through that grimy window, I made a decision. Wouldn't tell the kids anything, not yet. Vivian had designed this whole thing like a construction project. Every step calculated, every reveal timed perfect. If she wanted me to wait until my birthday, then I'd wait. I wanted to see just how far their greed would take them before the truth came out. The next few days were strange as hell. I was still that same broke old man living in a dump, eating stale bread, counting pennies. But now I had a secret burning inside me like a forge fire. I walked those Dallas streets feeling like I had some kind of invisible superpower. People looked at me and saw just another forgotten old-timer. They had no idea I owned enough real estate to buy and sell most of them. But there was still that contact icon I'd noticed in the corner of the phone screen. One number saved with no name attached. My birthday was 2 days away, and something told me that number was going to be important real soon. The landlord came knocking again the next morning, right on schedule, like a bill collector. Same dead eyes, same beer breath, same attitude, like I was something stuck to his boot. "Time's up, Pierce. 2 weeks are done. You got the money or not?" I stood there in my doorway, looking at this man who held my immediate future in his hands. Part of me wanted to tell him about those property deeds, about the $8 million sitting in my name. But Vivian's voice was still echoing in my head. "Wait, my love, wait, I need 2 more days, please." "Hell no. I already gave you 2 days. That's all I'm asking." Something in my voice must have gotten through to him. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe he just didn't want to deal with the paperwork of throwing an old man into the street. He spit into the parking lot and shook his head. 2 days, not 1 hour more. And I want cash, not some sob story about your kids. After he left, I went back inside and stared at that phone. Vivian had said I wasn't alone, but sitting in that dump of an apartment, I sure felt like the loneliest man in Texas, unless she'd left me something else, someone else. I opened the phone and found that contact's icon in the corner, one number saved with no name. Dallas area code. My finger shook like an old leaf as I pressed call. It rang 3 times. 4, 5. I figured nobody would answer, but then a man's voice came through. Older, warm, with the kind of Texas drawl that made you think of front porches and honest handshakes. "Hello, Hunter. I've been waiting for your call." My throat went dry as sawdust. This stranger knew my name, had been expecting me, but I didn't have the first clue who he was. "Who is this?" I managed to croak out. "Name's Marshall Brooks. I was Vivian's closest friend for 35 years. Also her personal attorney. Different from that Cooper fellow who handled your family's corporate business." His voice was patient, gentle, like he understood exactly how confused I was. "Vivian asked me to wait for your call. She told me it would come exactly when you needed it most. I don't understand any of this. I know you don't, and I'm sorry for what you've been going through. Vivian told me her whole plan. Thought she was crazy at first, putting you through such hell. But she insisted it was the only way to wake you up. Wake up from what? From 42 years of being invisible, of forgetting who you were before you became everybody else's caretaker." Marshall paused. "You found the property documents?" "Yeah. Still can't believe they're real. They're as real as the ground you're standing on. Every one of those properties has been generating income for years. The money's been piling up in a special account in your name. Right now, there's about $200,000 in cash available, plus the value of the real estate." My legs gave out. Had to grab the wall to keep from hitting the floor. $200,000 in cash while I was 2 days away from being thrown out on the street for owing $800. Why didn't she tell me? Why let me suffer like this? Because she knew you better than you knew yourself, Hunter. If she'd told you while she was alive, you would have insisted every penny go to the children, to the business, to anybody but you. You've always been that way, putting yourself last in line. He was right. Dead on accurate. If Vivian had told me about that money, I would have given it all away without thinking twice. What am I supposed to do now? For now, nothing. Vivian was clear about that. She wants you to wait until your birthday. There's more to this than what you've seen. But I can help with your immediate problem. I understand you're about to be evicted. 2 days, or I'm out on the street. That's not happening. I'm transferring $5,000 to your account tonight. Use it for rent and whatever else you need until your birthday. It's your own money, Hunter, not charity. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just hang on a little longer. It's only 2 more days. His voice got softer. One more thing you should know. Your children don't have any idea about this. Neither does Cooper. Vivian kept everything separated so nobody could mess up her plan. When your birthday comes, everybody's going to get the shock of their lives. Especially my kids. Especially them. I could hear him smiling through the phone. Take care, Hunter. Don't hesitate to call if you need anything. This number will always be available. The call ended. I stared at that phone, trying to wrap my head around everything. Vivian had planned this like she was designing a skyscraper. Every beam calculated, every support placed just right. And even though part of me was still mad as hell at her for putting me through this nightmare, another part was starting to understand what she'd done. She'd set me free. In her own twisted, complicated way, she'd given me the chance to see myself without her, without my children, without anybody else defining who I was supposed to be. That night I checked my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for Marshall's transfer. It came through at 11:23 p.m. Bank notification lit up the screen. Deposit received, $5,000. I stared at those numbers until my eyes blurred. For the first time in months, I had hope burning in my chest like a pilot light that wouldn't go out. The next morning, I walked into that landlord's office like a man who owned the place. Had $2,500 in cash stuffed in an envelope. Enough for back rent and 3 months ahead. The look on his face when I dropped that money on his desk was worth every minute of hell I'd been through. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, counting the bills twice like he thought they might be counterfeit. "That's my business. We square now?" Yeah, we're square. I walked out of there with my head held high for the first time in months. Still lived in that same dump, still wore the same worn-out clothes, but something had changed inside me, like an engine that had been sputtering, finally getting the right fuel. That afternoon, I got a call from Preston. First time I'd heard his voice in weeks. Something was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that sounded like panic. "Dad, we need to talk. Can you come to Cooper's office tomorrow morning? 10 a.m. Sharp. What's this about? Just be there. It's important." He hung up before I could ask any more questions. I sat there looking at that phone, wondering what had them spooked. Tomorrow was March 18th, my 68th birthday, the day Vivian said everything would be revealed. The next morning, I put on my best shirt and drove to Cooper's office. Same glass building, same marble lobby, but this time I wasn't some broken-down old man begging for scraps. I was a man with $8 million in property and over $1 million in the bank, even if nobody else knew it yet. When I walked into that conference room, all 3 of my kids were already there. But they looked different, worried, scared, like they'd been caught doing something they shouldn't. Cooper was there too, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "Sit down, Dad," Preston said, pointing to the same chair where they'd humiliated me months ago. I sat down slow, taking my time, watching their faces. Whatever was eating at them, it was eating good. Cooper cleared his throat and started talking in that lawyer voice of his. "Mr. Pierce, we've discovered some irregularities in the company finances. During the transition audit, we found some significant problems." "What kind of problems?" "Debts," Madison said, her voice tight as a guitar string. "Hidden debts that Mom apparently structured into the business. Loans with killer interest rates. Projects that are hemorrhaging money. Contracts with penalty clauses that are destroying us." Preston looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 months. "We thought we inherited a $12 million company. Turns out we inherited $12 million in debts too. We're bleeding cash faster than we can count it." I sat there processing this information, feeling pieces of Vivian's puzzle clicking into place. She hadn't just built me a secret empire. She'd turned their inheritance into a trap, a beautiful golden trap that was now closing around their necks. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, keeping my voice steady as a level. Cooper shuffled his papers. "Because legally, you're still part of the Pierce family, and there might be certain assets in your name that could help resolve this crisis." There it was, the real reason for this meeting. They weren't worried about their old dad. They thought I might have something they could use to save their sinking ship. I don't have anything, I said simply. You were all there when the will was read. I got a phone. That's it. That phone. Preston leaned forward like a hunting dog on a scent. Did you ever get it unlocked? My mind raced. I could lie. Could tell them it was just old pictures and voicemails. But something in me wanted to see how far they'd go. Wanted to know if there was any real love left, or if this was all just financial panic wearing a family face. Yeah. I unlocked it. All three of them tensed up like they'd been shocked. Cooper leaned forward, and what was inside? Old photos, voice messages, memories. Nothing that would help with money problems. The disappointment on their faces was plain as day. Madison started crying, not pretty tears, but ugly, desperate sobs of someone watching their perfect world collapse. I'm going to lose the house. The renovation contractor wants $400,000 and I can't pay him. He's threatening to sue. Wesley looked sick, his face gray as concrete. I sold 2 of those classic cars way under value because I needed quick cash. Now I find out they were collateral for loans. I'm in legal trouble up to my eyeballs. I watched my 3 children, the people I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, and felt nothing but emptiness where a father's love used to be. Not pleasure in their suffering, but not compassion either. Just a hollow space where unconditional love had died. I'm sorry this is happening to y'all, I said, and meant it. I was sorry. Sorry they'd gotten to this point. Sorry Vivian had to teach them this way. Sorry it had come to this. Could you talk to Cooper? Preston's voice was almost pleading now. See if there's some way to challenge the will, some loophole we missed. I stood up slowly. After 42 years of marriage, your mother left me a phone. You really think she missed anything? The silence that followed was heavy as a thundercloud. Today was my birthday, and today, everything was about to change. I was about to leave when my phone rang. Marshall's number. I answered it right there in front of everybody. Happy birthday, Hunter. You ready for the rest of the story? I think so. Good. There's one more thing Vivian left for you. Check your phone. There should be a new folder that unlocked this morning. I opened Vivian's phone right there at that conference table with my children watching like hawks. Sure enough, a new folder had appeared. Birthday gift. Inside was a single document. I opened it and nearly dropped the phone. It was a business registration for Pierce Legacy Construction, LLC, filed 6 months before Vivian died. Owner, Hunter Pierce. Assets, $2,000 in cash, plus equipment, tools, and a 5-acre lot in Mesquite, zoned for light industrial use. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone steady. Vivian had built me my own company. Not just properties to manage, but a fully equipped construction outfit ready to go. Everything I needed to get back to what I loved most, building things with my own hands. There's more, Marshall's voice continued through the speaker, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mrs. Pierce left very specific instructions about today's meeting. Preston, Madison, and Wesley were staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Cooper looked confused as a cat in a doghouse. Marshall's voice kept coming through that speaker, filling the conference room. Hunter, your wife built you a parallel empire worth over $11 million total, $8 million in real estate, $1.2 million in cash accounts, and $2 million in your new construction company. All completely separate from the family business, all legally yours. The silence in that room was louder than a thunderstorm. I watched my children's faces as Marshall's words hit them. Preston's mouth fell open like a broken gate. Madison went white as fresh paint. Wesley just stared at the phone like it was speaking in tongues. That's impossible, Preston whispered. It's not only possible, it's been real for years, Marshall continued. Your mother spent the last decade building Hunter's independence while you 3 were taking everything for granted. Cooper found his voice. How much did you say the total was? $11,200,000. Give or take a few thousand. Marshall's voice was steady as bedrock. Hunter, you're one of the wealthiest men in Dallas County, and you've been sleeping in the efficiency apartment because you didn't know it. I stood up slowly, looking down at my 3 children. For months they'd treated me like garbage, like some broken-down old man who wasn't worth their time. Now they were staring at me like I was a stranger. For the record, I said, my voice carrying more strength than it had in years, Your mother left me that phone as a test to see if y'all had any real love left or if you were just greedy vultures picking over a carcass. Madison tried to speak through her tears. Dad, we didn't know. If we'd known you had money, you would have been different, I cut her off. You would have respected me because it was convenient, not because I was your father. You would have loved me for my bank account, not for the man who raised you. Preston started to stand up. Dad, we can work this out. We're family. Family doesn't kick their father out of his own house. Family doesn't laugh when a man loses everything. Family doesn't let an old man go hungry while they're spending thousands on toys. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back one more time. Y'all are in debt up to your necks, and I've got more money than I know what to do with. You want to know what I'm going to do with it? They were hanging on every word, hope flickering in their eyes like candle flames in the wind. Nothing. Not one damn penny. Not because I'm vengeful, but because your mother was right. Y'all need to learn what real work feels like. Need to understand that money without character is worthless as a screen door on a submarine. I headed for the door. Someday, maybe years from now, if you figure out how to be decent human beings instead of greedy children in grown-up bodies, maybe, we can talk. But that day ain't today. I walked out of that conference room with my head held high. Behind me, I heard sobbing, angry voices, the sound of a world falling apart. But I kept walking. 6 months later, I'm standing in front of my new workshop in Mesquite, watching 3 young carpenters I hired learn how to frame a wall the right way. Pierce Legacy Construction is small, but it's mine. We build custom homes for working families. Nothing fancy, just solid houses that'll last. I'm 68 years old, and for the first time in decades, I'm building things with my hands again. Creating something real, something that'll outlast me. My children never called. I heard through the grapevine that Preston's working as a project manager for someone else's company. Madison's living in an apartment, learning what a budget means. Wesley went back to school to study something useful for the first time in his life. Maybe someday they'll figure it out. Maybe not, but I'm at peace with both possibilities. Vivian left me more than money. She gave me back myself. And that, I'm learning, is worth more than all the gold in Texas. The phone sits on my desk now, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the hardest lessons, and sometimes losing everything is just the first step toward finding out who you really are.